Morning, glory, and evening grace, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Good Friday to you. I'll be on Special Report tonight. Hope you will watch that. Not joining me on Special Report tonight, Ben Domenech, a Fox News contributor, but he is, of course, the editor at The Spectator. He has a great podcast, and he's a great, wonderful, regular Friday guest. Ben, I have been sick as a dog for 2 weeks. I know you've got small children. I just want to welcome you to the world of having a plague ship in your house. It's just going to happen.
Yeah, no, so can I recommend something? It's very bougie for you, Hugh. You need to get on the IV drip plan. Okay, this is something that is celebrities use it. They use it to recover from hangovers, and rich people and tech bros and people like that use it. And I will tell you, it has actually made a very real difference in the amount of recovery time that I have from when my kids get sick. On essentially clockwork every 2 to 3 months.
Well, I went and saw the grandkids last week, and it was like boarding a plague ship.
I'm telling you, you know, it is. It is. But basically what it does is if you order it, it'll cost you, $250, and you get basically the
I'm a boomer, though. That's a very Gen Z thing.
And all sorts of other things pumped into your body. You just do it. Trust me. It's
now,
bougie.
before I get serious.
It's rich people stuff. It's not how I grew up, but I do it so that I can bounce back quickly and make it to my daughter's St. Patrick's Day dance tonight.
Okay, good for you. Good for you. Glad that you're going. The second lighthearted topic. You're a football guy, right?
Of course.
All right.
Are you kidding? I asked the president about the tush push.
That's right. That's right.
No.
So we've got two quarterbacks. We got Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders coming out in the draft, and Cam Ward separated a little bit from Miami, and Shedeur, of course, is Buffalo, and the Browns have the second. We have no quarterbacks. We have Kenny Pickett. God bless Kenny Pickett.
No, Kenny Pickett, replacement level quarterback.
Yeah. So what do you? Is Shedeur Sanders worth the second pick in the draft?
If I am Cleveland, I would take him.
Yep.
And the reason is that the ceiling on him is insane. Now, the floor is not ideal, meaning that he could very well be a bust. But I just think that you need to have a complete culture change in the quarterback room of Cleveland after everything that you guys have gone through. Not for your own problems. I mean, the decisions that the front office has made has been absolutely terrible. But look, you need a culture change, and I would go for it.
Yeah, this is the easiest thing. They did an internet competition.
I will say this: I had misgivings about picking Jaden Daniels last year. I will not.
Oh, that's right.
I was unsure. He was so skinny. He was so slight. I was not sure he was going to be able to last in the league. I worried that another second overall pick, Heisman winner, skinny, doesn't necessarily know how to slide, that would end in disaster. Instead, it turned out to be the best season I've experienced as an adult in my life. And so I would just say you got to go for it.
I've never had a best season as an adult in my life. I've had season tickets at.
You got to go back to Brian Sipe.
At Bernie Kosar. Bernie was okay, but at least we got to a playoff football game at First Energy, or then old Cleveland Brown Stadium, Muni. There was an internet competition this week. Hardest franchise to be a fan of. Very, very funny. And it turned out to be the Browns. And that is true. It's the worst franchise. The Commanders were pretty close.
But I will dispute that only because I think there's a certain pride and strength in being a Browns fan that you attract the respect of the AFC North for being, having had such tough experiences and being snake bit in a way.
You overrate us.
Being a franchise like the Jaguars that had a brief moment in the sun under Mark Brunell and has basically been trash ever since.
Well, their owner is crazy down there. All right, let's get to the serious stuff. All right, shall we? I was listening. I've been sick for 2 days, so I've been listening to the book Masters and Commanders. It turns out that at Yalta, FDR was basically Joe Biden in his last year. He was completely slack-jawed, infirm, and the consequences were disastrous.
Did not know what was going on.
Did not know what was going on, and gave away half of Eastern Europe forever to Stalin, who took advantage of him. Churchill was cut out of the room. And it just struck me that the parallel between FDR at Yalta and Joe Biden in the last 2 years is direct. I'm no longer going to call it the Biden it's the Biden Regency. Do you think he knew anything that was going on, Ben?
I really think that we're going to look back and we're going to have, I think, books that come out over the next couple of years from some good journalists who are going to dig into this. And I do not include Jake Tapper in that, who will basically outline the fact that I don't think that this was a functional presidency for the last year and a half. And that is deeply disturbing. We cannot, you can't have someone who's making the kind of decisions at that highest level that Joe Biden was making, without confidence in his competence. And unfortunately, we can't have any of that. And I'll tell you one other thing, whatever you think of the, decisions that this Trump administration has been making, they've been making so many of them very quickly. I don't think that there's any question that this is a president who knows everything that's going on around him in terms of, paying attention to it, being very quick on the draw, seeing things happen and responding to them quickly. I know that you probably saw this naming or potential naming of Daniel Davis to the DNI.
Right. Executed, done. Yep. Over with.
That to me is a complete example of this, where something like that starts to be broached. I don't think that it was actually ever
vetted,
confirmed, vetted, et cetera. It flares up, and I think almost immediately the White House responds and says, wait a minute, this isn't what we're doing. We're not naming somebody like this to this role. And before the day is over, at 3:30, they come out and say, no, he is not getting in. And that's the difference. It's basically a situation where you have somebody who from the top down is aware of what's going on, is making decisions that say, wait a minute, who approved this? What are we doing? No, we're not doing that.
That brings me to the Hamas deal. Mr. Witkoff is apparently a very smart man and very close to the president. He has arranged some kind of a deal. I think he's mad at Hamas now because Hamas has gone back on the deal. And we're going to get Idan Alexander, an American citizen, out of hostage tomorrow, and that's good. But Hamas has changed the terms of the deal. And
yes.
Are they just stupid? Are they so stupid as to think they're going to drive a wedge between the United States and Israel?
I think they really are. I mean, wait, can I back up a step here?
Sure.
There's something going on here that we need to address. And you and I and others are paying attention to it closely enough to see what's going on, which is that the Iranian regime, which does not have the power to actually push back against America because they don't have the resources to do it as such, they are doing some things that are clearly meant to influence the American conversation, to fund certain influencers, to play a role in the conversation in America in a way that is designed to create a wedge between us and Israel that I think is easily detectable if you're paying any attention to what's going on there, to who's showing up in these places, to who's doing interviews with these people. It's very disturbing to me because I don't.
Well, let me name a name. Well, Joe Rogan does not know what he's doing. He's a very good interviewer. He doesn't know anything.
Hugh, I was down in Austin at the Comedy Mothership. I've had brief interactions with Joe over the years. He doesn't know when he's being played.
That's it.
Which is it. In other words, his instincts, I think, are actually quite good. It's more that he does not know when someone is walking into the conversation with him with an agenda that is inauthentic, that is actually being funded and pushed and intentionally positioned. And that's what America's enemies are doing right now because they understand the same thing that we do, which is that these entities, these outside, podcasts and platforms and all these other things, they're far more influential than getting someone on CNN.
Yes.
Before, that's what they were trying to do.
Our friend Matt Continetti said this week on the Commentary podcast, the 18 to 30-year-old male demographic, they don't know anything and they don't trust anyone. But they like Rogan, so they listen to Joe Rogan. Good for him. Glad that he's got a platform. He's a good interviewer. But if you bring on malign people with an agenda to drive away.
I would only disagree with Matt to the sense that he says they don't know anything. I think that they actually are a little smarter than that. But I will say that they do not know the way that they are being manipulated, which is something that you and I are much more aware of because we're used to clocking these things, and things that seem like ops, things that seem like influence operations are very much stuff that, perks us up and makes us pay attention, because we're like, okay, this is something where they're trying to influence us.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that the under 30 set does not know.
They may not even believe in espionage, Ben. I got to go to the break. We'll come back. They may not even believe in influence operations. They may not know that they're long-standing. They've been used since the beginning of time. Since that's what the Trojan horse comes from. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. Ben Domenech is with me. He's the editor-at-large for The Spectator. Follow him on X at B. Domenech. Stay with me. He's coming right back. I am back with Ben Domenech. Ben, a little bit of bio for the benefit of the audience and you. I walked into the Department of Justice in 1984 after a background check, was given SCI, sensitive compartmented information clearances to do the domestic counterterrorism warrants for the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. Sat down, and in 24 hours, my world was rocked. I had no idea how many bad people were in the United States trying to get us killed. They were mostly Soviets then, East Germans, some Czechs. There were a lot of Cubans, not many Palestinian activists, not much Chi-Com activity. They didn't have the reach. And there were no Iranians because the revolution hadn't really gotten its wings going yet. They hadn't figured it out. I haven't had a clearance since 1989, so I have no way of knowing now. But I'll bet you the Chi-Coms and the Iranians combined dwarf the Soviet complex of the late 80s. I just do.
I would 100% believe that, and obviously just moving around D.C. and being aware of the people who are influenced along those lines on a very interstitial level. I would just say this is the thing that people underrate about this particular moment. America's enemies understand the way that influence works within the American sphere more than legacy media does. Meaning that in the past, we had a situation where, all right, how are you trying to influence things? You're trying to get someone who's a columnist at the Washington Post or the New York Times. You're trying to get somebody who's a reporter within the White House who's influenced by you or has some kind of compromising, effect. Now we have a situation where these people are trying to populate some of the biggest podcasts in the country. They're working diligently to track the things that people are saying online, to push certain conversations, to elevate certain phrases, words, frames of the way that things are going on, and that is being accepted, rejected, or in terms of some of these people, unfortunately, pushed in ways that is very apparent, I think, for people like you and like me who have paid attention to this stuff over the years, but is not apparent to the average consumer. And so when you see something that's coming along and you say, this is something that seems a little odd. Why is this person pushing this narrative? Why is this person interviewing this individual overseas? You start to ask questions, and when you start to ask those questions, it's almost always a preface to there's something else that's going on here. And unfortunately, I think for the American consumer, they haven't learned yet to analyze that as such.
And the anti-American trio is the Chi-Coms, the Russians, and the Iranians. And they all run ops. And they're all pretty damn good at it. 30 seconds.
Well, and I would just add the North Koreans to that, but they're not very good at it.
They're not very good.
So you don't have to worry about them as much. They're a little more blatant. They don't get subtlety.
But the Chi-Coms are really good at it, and the Iranians
really good at it. They're really good at it. And I think that one of the things that we have to watch out for here, Hugh, is the real aim of the Iranians is to create a split between the American right of center, dominant political wing at the moment, and the people and the leadership of Israel.
I agree. And we'll come back and talk about that, because that is really the most important story. Stand by. Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. I am joined by Ben Domenech. You can follow Ben on X at B. Domenech. He's editor-at-large for The Spectator, Fox News contributor. Ben, we're cooking with gas during the break here, so I want to go back and just give you the floor, because this is so important for people to understand. The attempt to drive a wedge between Israel and the United States is funded by Iran. They are trying, and Israel is our greatest strategic ally, and I'm saying they're better than England and France. They're all three nuclear powers, but Israel's more reliable, more innovative, more powerful, more willing to use their power. They're not crippled culturally. And we are being told that we have to worry about the First Amendment rights of Mohammed Khalil, and we don't. That's been settled law since 1952. It's up to the Secretary of State to throw people out. And we're being told...
By the way, I assume you probably played this already, but I felt like the Marco Rubio explanation on that was one of the most eloquent things that I've heard in recent months. And, my colleague, at formerly at the Manhattan Institute, now he's still there, but I was there as well. Ilya Shapiro has who is himself an immigrant. Has his own, argument about this that I encourage people to read on his Substack, because he says this is not a First Amendment issue at all.
No, it's not. It's a slam dunk. 8 U.S.C. 1227. Yeah. It's just a slam dunk. But now here's the question: what do we do about this? There's old new media like talk radio and Fox News. There's new media, but there are the podcast world, and God bless them all if they know what they're doing. But if you asked any of our big podcasters who Theodore Herzl is, or if you asked them about the Balfour Declaration or anything having to do with the last 100 years, do you think they'd have a clue?
Look, we have to have a little bit of forgiveness here. These people are new to this stuff. You know how it works, Hugh. When you discover something for the first time, sometimes you settle upon it as if it's something new to the whole world, when in reality it's something that, for those of us who paid attention to history, we've known for a very long time. And that's something that I think is a classic Achilles heel of these podcast approaches. But this is the thing that you just mentioned that I think is so important for people to understand. The Iranian regime is not so powerful that they can do this without having kind of a guerrilla warfare attitude toward influencing American opinion. And so what are they doing? They are pushing people, and they are promoting people, and they are creating bot networks to promote the arguments of people who are aimed at splitting America from Israel, not just the government, not just Netanyahu, but just the concept of Israel as being something that needs to be defended. And this administration, to its credit, from my perspective, has taken a very strong line on the opponents of Israel and on those who wish to foment criminal activity. By the way, not just this is not about speech. This is not just about endorsing things. You can endorse all sorts of things. You can endorse Nazis. You can endorse Hamas. You can say all sorts of things in promotion of the terrorist cartels that we face. But when you actually take activity and you participate in criminal action on campuses, you do not have a right to be here.
Yeah, and I began the weekend podcast by talking about priorities, Ben. Our biggest enemy is China, but our second biggest enemy is the Iranian-China alliance. And I don't know how we get...
And we can't view that as not being an axis. I mean,
it is an axis.
It's obviously, this is connected. It's not something that we can deny. And look, the point is just this. Hugh, I am not someone who favors war. I'm not someone who wants to go to war with China at all. It would be devastating. It would be terrible for the world. What we need to be doing is seeing this in a clear-eyed view and balancing against them, using deterrence, using all the different investments that we need to make in terms of militarily, in terms of our backing of Taiwan, et cetera.
But
we have to make those decisions now. We can't wait, because it's not going to be something that in the future we're going to be able to do and spin up in a very quick way. It's something that we have to be working on now.
I agree. Do you think we can get people to put down their hatred of Donald Trump long enough to realize it's not about Trump? We had TDS. Then we had a lot of people recover from TDS and begin to understand.
I don't know, Hugh. I mean, we saw this whole thing play out this week with Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
He promises, his progressive left friends that he's going to be fighting to shut down the government, which would have, of course, unleashed. I would have loved it.
Elon would have gone crazy
on Tuesday. It would have unleashed Doge to do whatever they wanted to do, which, from my perspective, would have been, hey, if you're an employee on furlough, just stay home.
Stay home forever. Yep.
But unfortunately, I think that there's a lot of work to be done there. And I'm not sure that the Republicans who are currently in Washington, with a few exceptions, but you know them, and so do I, have the capacity to think through this in the sense that we need to be acting right now to do the kind of deterrence and strength-building exercises with our military to prevent a future war.
Now, Ben, your age, I want to close with it. I think the three most important Republicans for the next 30 years are J.D. Vance, Tom Cotton, and Glenn Youngkin. Glenn Youngkin is third in that category, but he could rise. And maybe Doug Burgum and Marco Rubio in that category as well. Can any of them stop the bleeding of intellectual seriousness from the party? Because there's a bleed underway.
There is definitely a bleed underway, and one thing that I will say is, I mean, look, you and I have talked about how we've been impressed with J.D. Vance and how much he's found his message, found his groove. I think that he needs to be recruiting. I think he needs to be out there recruiting people to come into the party, to come in to run for some of these seats, to be contenders in the midterms, and to bring a seriousness and an understanding of the world as it is to policy, because we need a lot more. We can't. I mean, Elon's not rolling out a cloning machine tomorrow, as far as I know.
But will we find a Buckley moment? Buckley had to drive out the Birchers. Somebody's got to stand up and drive out the anti-Israel people, and I mean drive them out into the wilderness. They can't be in the Republican Party.
I think I believe I'm completely with you on that, Hugh. But I think it's even more than that. I think they have to drive them out by making the case to the same audience that exists for these podcasts and for all these things out there, that basically says, no, this is why they're wrong. And this is why I understand why, the arguments that you have accepted, the arguments you have heard, this is why you may be open to them, but this is why they're wrong. They're fundamentally wrong, and they're wrong for the future of the country that we want, the country that we love.
Well said. We'll leave it there. Ben, thanks for a half hour. Enjoy the St. Patrick's Day dance. I hope you have a nice green suit and a green hat and all that good stuff.
I have a green sweater. We'll see how much food ends up on it, because that's the way that you assess it with a 4 and a 2-year-old.
Enjoy, my friend. Enjoy. Thank you so much. Ben Domenech, editor-at-large at The Spectator. Follow him on X at BDomenech.